In episode 7, part 2 picks up where part 1 left off. When we last learned back in part 1, the mutants are now setting free the Lunataks. For the Thundercats, this is bad news. So now all they had to do is get back to the Cat's Lair to tell the others what had happened. So on the way to Cat's Lair, Snarf pleads his case first. Mumm-ra comes back and now the Lunataks. I just wish someone would explain to me what was going on here. Well, Chitara feels the exact same way and then told Snarf that there's no one that could explain it to us. I'm afraid we're on our own. And so the Thunder Tank heads back to the Cat's Lair. So back on Fire Rock Mountain with the mutants, since back in part 1 they did what they were supposed to do, set the Lunatics free. And so that's what happened. So now that the Lunatics are free at last, we'll introduce them one at a time. The first lunatic to be set first is Tugmug. He can move around all over the place, and of course he has a gravity gun for a weapon. Next is Red Eye, and he has the infrared vision and a large desk on his chest. Next is Oloro. He can hypnotize anybody with the Sight Club. Next is Chilla. She can control heat and cold with those powers of hers, and the last two to be set free were Oddmuk, and riding on top of him was Luna, the leader of the Lunataks. She's the second shortest of the group. So now that the Lunataks are set free, Luna, the leader of the group, demanded to know who set us free? Who's responsible? So Sly, the leader of the mutants, stepped forward to say, we're here to serve you. So Amma was the first to step forward to destroy the mutants. But Sly says, wait a minute. Hear what we have to say first. So Voldemort was first to speak in his case to say, besides, you owe us one. But Luna, the leader of the Lunatics, soon dismissed him and says, we don't owe you a thing. Now remember Mama from part 1, he disguised himself as Mumm-ra. After he saw what had happened, that's when it's up to Mumm-ra to break up the fight between the mutants and the Lunatics. So Mumm-ra speaks in his case to the Lunatics. He says, stop where you are. I won't allow this. You and the mutants are forbidden to fight against each other. Why? Because I said so. Then Mumm-ra says, true, we may have our differences in the past, but I can assure you, all is forgiven, he said. So Mumm-ra says that the mutants and the lunatics should be working together now because, as he says, it's up to them to destroy the enemies themselves, especially the Thundercats themselves. Then Mumm-ra says, with you lunatics working together with the mutants, we can rule through Earth together and, of course, plunder it whenever necessary. So after the six lunatics had thought about what Mumm-ra has said, and then Luna has her turn to ask a question. So what happens then after we did all of this? Well, Mumm-ra said when it's his turn to plead his case. He said after that, y'all can divide Third Earth amongst yourselves, and the mutants can too, he said. So after Mumm-ra had asked the question of what they thought of it, so the six lunatics thought it over. So, after the Lunataks had had their discussion, their leader, Luna, had made a suggestion. Why don't we go along with Mumm-ra's plan for a while? Just for now, anyway, she suggested. Also, as Luna suggested that maybe the Lunatics can learn something. So, Luna, the leader of the Lunatics, told Mumm-ra, okay, we'll do this little favor for you. Then Luna says, even better, we'll forgive our past differences for the time being, she said. Then Luna also agrees with Mumm-ra that she and the Lunatics will have to decide for themselves on how they should divide Third Earth once the Thundercats are finished off. So Mumm-ra and the Lunatics had agreed to work together. So Mumm-ra says, well, of course we will. Meanwhile, at Cat's Lair, it was in the council room that Lionel had gathered Linkso, Tigra, Chitara, the Thunderkittens, and Snarf for a meeting. And so the reason for this meeting? Well, Lionel just told the Thundercats that they had to find out of a plan to get inside Darkseid, and they knew they had to do it quick, because there's a serious situation at hand. Also, as Lionel says in his case, they had to find out more about the Lunatics and to find out what the mutants are up to. The only three Thundercats are not there for a meeting are Panthro, Bengali, and Mumm-ra, and now he wants to know where they are. Well, Chitara went first to speak in her case to say at the moment they're at the Thundrium mines. Well, Tigra has his turn to plead his case to say that first of all, there's some good news. The Braille board is on its way. And as for the new vehicles that the Thundercats have been building lately for their friends, that they had neglected maintenance duties lately. Well, now here comes the bad news. According to Tigra, he says as far as the Thundrium supply is concerned, it's getting low. So meanwhile, the Thundrillium mine, Bengali, Panther, and Palmyra were gathering Thundrillium, but realized that they were running out. And now Panther was getting upset. And now he's left to wonder who took the rest of the supply and why. Now realizing that the Thundrillium supply had been stolen, Panther runs inside the mine first. And then Bengali and Palmyra knew that he's not going alone because they're running to catch up with him. So now that the three Thundercats are inside the mine, that's when Panther heard some noise that's coming from nearby. And they didn't have to look for very far, they being Panther, Palmyra, and Bengali. And what they saw was unbelievable. A bunch of brutemen that was pushing the mine car full of Thunderium. So long story short, when the Thundercats knew that there were brutemen that was stealing Thunderium, that's when the Bruteman decides to push the mine core towards them. Luckily, the Thundercats moved out of the way. So long story short, now that the three Thundercats had avoided the mine car, well, Palmyra and Bengali stepped forward to try to attack the Bruteman. But Panther holds them back and said, "Wait a minute." So Panther stepped forward and says, "Now take it easy, fellas." So Bengali speaks in his case to say, "Well, what do you know? They're brutemen. They're very gentle, but brutal." And of course, Pumar says, "Oh, these poor things. They're shackled and chained up." Then Panthro had a hunch that the brutemen must be prisoners of a master or a mistress that controls them. And whoever it is, Panthro said, they stole the Thundranium. Now we have to find out where this master or mistress is. So Palmyra, who agrees with Panthro, insists, "But first we gotta find a way to get these chains off of them." But then Bengali volunteers to do it because he says, "Leave it to me, I have an idea." So he went over to the toolbox and grabbed a hammer, and then before you know it, in quick lightning speed, using the hammer, Bengali got the chains off of the brutemen. Now Panthro and Palmyra were very amazed. So Panthro says, "Wow, that's very impressive." "Well, why not?" Bengali says. "I am the Thunderian blacksmith after all." And of course he's not kidding. So back with the Thunder Tank who had just left the Thunderium mines, they met up with Lionel, they being Panthro, Palmyra, and Bengali. Now they wanted to know from Lionel what was going on. Well, Snarf explains that this is terrible, very bad news. And of course, Lionel explains why. He says that there have been abductions all over the villages everywhere. The bumpkins have been kidnapped. According to one of the bumpkins that told Panther this bad news. But that's not all. The Willows have been kidnapped too. "Don't worry," Lionel says. "I'm sure we'll get to the bottom of this." Now Panther, who agrees with Lionel, says, "If we ever get there to them in time." "What do you mean by that?" remarks Snarf asked. "Well," Bengali says, "wait till you see what we found in the Thundrinium mines earlier. And of course what we didn't find." So the Thundercats had to head back to the Thundrinium mines. So meanwhile, back at Fire Rock Mountain, well, down below you see the Bruteman building Sky Tomb. So Chilla of the Lunataks just pleaded her case with Volterman to say, "I hope the Brutemen have followed the plans very well." "Just relax," Volterman said. "If they can build Castle Plunder, then I'm sure they don't have a problem building this place," he said. Then Chilla of the Lunatics just pleaded her case with Voltaren to say how primitive Castle Plondar is and that Sky Tomb was more advanced and etc. Now you can tell, long story short, that Voltron was not amused with that insult, so he pleaded his case to Chilla of the Lunatics to say, if you're more advanced than we are, then why don't you do those repairs yourself, he said. Well, for Chilla, that was the last straw, so she uses her ice power on Voltron's throat. So she said, listen to me. You and your mutants have a job to do, so I suggest you finish it, she said. So what are you waiting for? So now that Chilla had uses her heat power on freezing Voltron's throat, that's when Voltron went and finished the job. And of course, she pleaded herself to case to say that the Lunatics are no match for the mutants. I guess she's not wrong in her case. So meanwhile, back with the Thundercats, we'll start with the Thunderkids doing a search from below on their spaceports, but they found absolutely nothing. And they reported to Lionel, who was in the hovercat. And of course, after hearing this bad news, at first Lionel was going to suggest to the Thunderkins they should head back to Cat's Lair, but then he spotted down below that there are tracks. Meanwhile, Sly, the leader of the mutants, were enslaving the Willows and of course the Bumpkins by pushing the wagon full of Thunderalium. But he's not alone, because with him is Tugmug of the Lunataks, and they saw Lionel coming in the hovercat. When Tugmug of the Lunatics had learned it from Sly, the leader of the mutants, he made a suggestion. He says, make sure the slaves take care of the Thundradium and take them to Skytomb. I'll take care of Lionel, he suggested, and so Sly agrees. So back with Tugmug of the Lunatics, long story short, he sees Lionel in the hovercat coming, and of course not if Tugmug has anything to do about it, so he goes one-on-one with Lionel and knocks out the hovercat. Well, good news, the hovercat survived intact, but as for Lionel, he was grabbed by Tugmug. So both Tugmug and Lionel have a combat with each other, and watching it happen was Sly, the leader of the mutants. So before Lionel can continue with his battle with Tugmug, he needed help, and needed bad. So what does he do? He does what any good guy would do, project a Thundercat signal from his sword, of course. So that's what he did. So meanwhile, back with the Thunderkins, they're on now on their way to where the signal was coming from, and it's coming from Lino. Meanwhile, back in the Cat Slayer's hangar, well, good news for Panther, and he now has the fifth vehicle on the list, the Thunderstrike. So now that he, Chitara, Tigra, and Linkso are now on their way. So long story short, back with Lionel, he's still battling Tugmug of the Lunataks. And so both of them had their combat. It went on and on and on and on. That was until Lionel was disarmed by Tugmug. And just before Lionel could reach his sword, that's when Tugmug grabs it first, and what he did next was unbelievable. He breaks the sword in half. So after Tugmug breaks Lionel's sword in half, that's when they decided to have a continuing battle. But before they could do that, that's when Tugmug was more than happy to introduce himself. He said that he had originally came from the moons of Plondar and etc. And of course, both Lionel and Tugmug are continuing to have their combat. So after Tugmug had pleaded a case with Lionel to say it'll be a short acquaintance, but not in the Thunderkins case it won't. So luckily for them, they came to Lionel's rescue when they did. So long story short, after the Thunderkins had threw the capsules at Tugmug, they thought they finished him off, but they were wrong. So he jumps out of nowhere to attack. Long story short, while that is going on, back in the Thunderstrike, we have Panthro, Linkso, and of course Chitara and Tigra. Well, good news for Linkso, the Braille board worked. And of course, even better, with the Braille board, Linkso can see a lot better than the other Thundercats. Of course, Panthro wasn't kidding when he pleaded his case to Linkso. Long story short, also the good news is that the Thunderstrike has passed its flying test. Well, back with Lionel and the kittens, well, why the kids seriously injured but otherwise fine, and that's when Tugmug and of course Sly, the leader of the mutants, had told Tugmug that there'll be more that is heading their way, and he's not wrong because the Thunderstrike started to attack the bad guys. Well, long story short, Tugmug of the Lunatics just pleaded his case to say he's not going to be afraid of the Thundercats and etc. Well, even though Slife had agreed with Tugmug, but he said that delivering Thundrillium to Skytomb is a lot more important than battling the Thundercats themselves, Sly suggested. So finally, Tugmug agrees with Sly, the leader of the mutants, and says, "For once, you're right," and so they both head off. So long story short, back with the Thunderstrike, it had landed right in the middle of the forest, and then they joined up with Wily Kid, Wily Cat, and Lino. So back with Panther and Tiger, who came out of the Thunderstrike first, they were asking Lino who it was and what it was. Well, according to Lino, he says he's called Tugmug of the Lunataks, and he and the rest of the Lunatics are originally from the moons of Plunder, he explains. Well, Linkso, who happens to agree with Lino, he says that if any creature who had come to such a place, like the moons of Plondar, they may have extraordinary powers to have them used right here on Third Earth, Linkso said. So why the kid wanted to know from Lino, they're not all like that by any chance, are they? Well, for both of our sakes, let's hope not, Lino said. So Lionel made a suggestion with Linkso that they should all meet back at the lair to investigate a little further, and Linkso agrees. So meanwhile at Fire Rock Mountain, Slythe and Tugma just told Luna, the leader of the Lunataks, the bad news. After learning about it, that's when Luna made a suggestion that they should all prepare themselves. Yes, Sly says, but there's a problem. The Thundercats couldn't cross through Darkside, he said. Also, Sly says that there's a bigger problem. There's no way that the Thundercats can go through Fire Rock Mountain either. Even Tugmug agrees with Sly, and he even said that the Thundercats can never stand a chance against the Lunataks. Besides, even Tugmug had pleaded a case to Luna that he had snapped the Sword of Omens in half. At least that's what he says in his case. Even though Luna agrees with Tugmug, but then said that there is one thing that you should never do, she said. Never, ever, under any circumstances, underestimate the Thundercats whatsoever, she said. And why is that? Because as Luna says in her case, they must be prepared at all times. So meanwhile, in Sky Tomb's control room, that's when Sly told Voltron to hurry it up in there. Oh, come on, give me a break, Voltron said. As a matter of fact, there's some good news. The Thundranium hoppers are all filled up. Then what are you waiting for? Luna said. Power it up. And so that's what Voltron did. So now that Skytoon's control room is full of power, it has its lights on. So long story short, after the control room of the Skytomb is all powered up thanks to Voltron, Jackalman went first to speak in his case to say, you see, none of this would be possible if it wasn't for our help, he said. Well, Chilla of the Lunatics, although she agrees with Jackalman, but then she pleads her case to say that the Lunatics don't need help from anyone, especially with the mutants, she said. But unfortunately for the Lunatics and the mutants, none of them knew that the Willow leader and of course the Vulcan had made their escape from Skytomb. So meanwhile back at Lair, well thanks to Bengali and his blacksmithing skills that he learned on Thundera, well good news, he reforged the Sword of Omens for Lionel. So that's interesting. Even Lionel was impressed and says, "What's your secret?" Well, we blacksmiths of Thundera are in fact qualified enough to do the job such as this, Bengali explains. Even for other blacksmiths like myself, he said. Of course, what's even better, Bengali had made a weapon himself, the Hammer of Thundera, and that proved to be useful. Then suddenly Snarf shows up. He says, "Hey, Lino, come quick!" And so both Bengali and Lino follow Snarf. So back with Bengali, Lino, and Snarf, they saw a Thunder Tank pull up. It's Chitara and Palmyra. And of course, Chitara just told Lino, Bengali, and Snarf the good news that they just found out what both the Lunatics and the Mutants were up to. Then Palmyra says, "Wait, there's some even better news," because she said that she and Chitara had picked up the Warlow leader and the Vulcan who had just made their escape earlier on the way. So meanwhile, in the Cat's Lair's console room, Well, the warlord leader had just told the Thundercats what had happened. He said that first of all, the Lunatics had built this fortress called the Sky Tomb. Now, that's the exact same place where himself and the Vulcan had left from earlier. In fact, according to the warlord leader, when he said that the Sky Tomb itself is about more powerful than Cat's Lair itself. Even though Panther had agreed with the little leader, and that explains what the Lunatics have been up to. No wonder they stole the Thunderium. He said that there's no way that the fortress itself could match the power within the Cat's Lair itself. So even though Lionel agrees with Panthro, he says we need to come up with a plan to get to Fire Rock Mountain. Plus, even better, according to Lionel, they must find out what kind of alliance that the Lunatics and the Mutants are planning about. So the Balkan went next to speak in his case to let slip to the Thundercats that there is a way in. There is? Lionel asked. Well, the Balkan confessed that not only that there is a way in, but he may just let slip to say, well, I thought everybody has known about it. Well, the Balkan explains that as legend has it, there's a way inside through Darkside, and that's through the canyon. Then the Willow leader continues to pick up where the Balkan left off. He said that inside the canyon was the Forest of Mists. That's where it starts. Well, Panthro has his turn to plead his case to say even if it were true, nobody can navigate through there. Then Linkso has his turn to plead his case to say maybe not, but maybe I can, he suggested. Then Linkso started to explain that since he's been blind and all, and he's been learning other senses since. Well, even though the force of mist themselves can deprive of you, Linkso explains, but it doesn't mean that they could deprive from me, obviously, he said. So in other words, in Linkso's case, he's just the Thundercat that's going to pull it off. Well, Panther who agrees with Linkso's plan and said, okay, let's do that. So off they went. So long story short, now that the Thunderstrike is well on its way to the canyon, just the way that the Vulcan and the World Leader has spoke about, well, according to Linkso, they should reach the Forest Abyss at any time. Well, long story short, according to Linkso, he at first couldn't find the canyons opening everywhere, and then Lionel claims his case to say maybe it's just a legend after all. But both the loyal leader and the Vulcan said that the opening of the canyon must be there. They're sure of it. So, good news for Linkso, he found it. Also the good news, thanks to the Thundercats and along with the Willow leader and the Vulcan, they finally made it right through the Forest of Mists. Well, despite a minor setback and long story short, good news for the Thundercats, and along with the Willow leader and the Bumpkin, they finally made it to Darkside, and without a problem. Then the Willow leader was more than happy to tell Lionel where the Sky Tomb was. It's right there where the peaks are at Fire Rock Mountain, he said. So while still in the Thunderstrike, the Warlow and the Bumpkin found this very hard to believe. The Sky Tomb was just there moments ago, the Bumpkin said. Then the Willow leader has his turn to plead his case, but it was just there, honest. We saw it. Well, Lionel says, when he has his turn to make a suggestion to Linkso to land the Thunderstrike somewhere so they can get a little closer. So that's what Linkso did. So after the Thundercats and along with the Warlord leader and the Vulcan got out of the Thunderstrike, the Warlord finds this very hard to believe and then it asks Lionel a question. It was just there moments ago when we left. Why would we lie about something like this? He said. Even the Vulcan agrees with the Warlord leader and he pleads his case to say he would never lie about this either. Then Panther says, hey Lionel, over here, come quick. So Lionel rushed over to where Panther is. So Lionel has the same suspicion as Panther is, and it's just what they thought. According to Linkso, when he has his turn to plead his case. He said, according to Lionel and Panther's suspicions, that yes, it is true. The Sky Tomb that both the Willow leader and the Vulcan had just left from is now gone. It's no longer there. So now that the Thundercats had confirmed with Link's suspicions that what he said is absolutely true, Sky Tomb is on the move, and it's moving really quick. Also, as Lionel says in his case, that unless something is done and done fast, then that means the Lunataks can move everywhere. Now the Sky Tomb's on the move, and with that, they can plunder everywhere and slave everyone that comes across. So this means bad news for both everyone and on Third Earth. So now with the Sky Tomb on the move, can the Thundercats come up with a plan? And if they do, what can they do about it? Well, there's only one thing left to find out, but right now, that's the end of episode 7 in part 2.